King Arthur was a legendary British leader who, according to medieval histories and romances, led the defensive Britain against Saxon invaders in the late 5th and early 6th centuries AD. The details of Arthur's story are mainly composed of folklore and literary invention, and his historical existence is debated and disputed by modern historians. The sparse historical background of Arthur is gleaned from various sources, including the Annales Cambriae, the Historia Brittonum, and the writings of Gildas. Arthur's name also occurs in early poetic sources such as Gododdin. Arthur is a central figure in the legends making up the so-called matter of Britain. The legendary Arthur developed as a figure of international interest largely through the popularity of Geoffrey of Monmouth's fanciful and imaginative 12th-century Historia Britanniae. In some Welsh and Breton tales and poems that date from before this work, Arthur appears either as a great warrior defending Britain from human and supernatural enemies or as a magical figure of folklore, sometimes associated with the Welsh otherworld ANNWN. How much of Geoffrey's Historia was adapted from such earlier sources, rather than invented by Geoffrey himself, is unknown. Although the themes, events and characters of the Arthurian legend varied widely from text to text, and there is no one canonical version, Geoffrey's version of events often served as the starting point for later stories. Geoffrey depicted Arthur as a king of Britain who defeated the Saxons and established an empire over Britain, Ireland, Iceland, Norway and Gaul. Many elements and incidents that are now an integral part of the Arthurian story appear in Geoffrey's Historia, including Arthur's father Uther Pendragon, the wizard Merlin, Arthur's wife Guinevere, the sword Excalibur, Arthur's conception at Tintagel, his final battle against Mordred at Camlann, and final rest in Avalon. The 12th-century French writer Chrétien de Troyes, who added Lancelot and the Holy Grail to the story, began the genre of Arthurian romance that became a significant strand of medieval literature. In these French stories, the narrative focus often shifts from King Arthur himself to other characters, such as various knights of the Round Table. Arthurian literature thrived during the Middle Ages but waned in the centuries that followed until it experienced a major resurgence in the 19th century. In the 21st century, the legend lives on, not only in literature but also in adaptations for theatre, film, television, comics and other media. Debated historicity. The historical basis for the King Arthur legend has long been debated by scholars. One school of thought, citing entries in the Historia Brittonum and Annales Cambriae, sees Arthur as a genuine historical figure, a Romano British leader who fought against the invading Anglo-Saxons sometime in the late 5th to early 6th century. The Historia Brittonum, a 9th-century Latin historical compilation attributed in some late manuscripts to a Welsh cleric called Nennius, contains the first datable mention of King Arthur, listing 12 battles that Arthur fought. These culminate in the Battle of Badon, where he is said to have single-handedly killed 960 men. Recent studies, however, question the reliability of the Historia Brittonum. The other text that seems to support the case for Arthur's historical existence is the 10th-century Annales Cambriae, which also link Arthur with the Battle of Badon. The Annales date this battle to 516 to 518, and also mention the Battle of Camlann, in which Arthur and Medrawd were both killed, dated to 537 to 539. These details have often been used to bolster confidence in the Historia's account and to confirm that Arthur really did fight at Badon. Problems have been identified, however, with using this source to support the Historia Brittonum's account. The latest research shows that the Annales Cambriae was based on a chronicle begun in the late 8th century in Wales. Additionally, the complex textual history of the Annales Cambriae precludes any certainty that the Arthurian annals were added to it, even that early. They were more likely added at some point in the 10th century and may never have existed in any earlier set of annals. The Gododdin entry probably derived from the Historia Brittonum. This lack of convincing early evidence is the reason many recent historians exclude Arthur from their accounts of sub-Roman Britain. In the view of historian Thomas Charles Edwards, at this stage of the inquiry, one can only say that there may well have been an historical Arthur. The historian can as yet say nothing of value about him. These modern admissions of ignorance are a relatively recent trend. Earlier generations of historians were less skeptical. The historian John Morris made the putative reign of Arthur the organizing principle of his history of sub-Roman Britain and Ireland, the Age of Arthur. Even so, he found little to say about a historical Arthur. Partly in reaction to such theories, another school of thought emerged which argued that Arthur had no historical existence at all. Morris's Age of Arthur prompted the archaeologist Noel Myers to observe that no figure on the borderline of history and mythology has wasted more of the historian's time. Gildas' 6th century polemic De Excidioe Conquestu Britanniae, written within living memory of Baden, mentions the battle but does not mention Arthur. Arthur is not mentioned in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle or named in any surviving manuscript written between 400 and 820. He is absent from Bede's early 8th century ecclesiastical history of the English people, another major early source for post-Roman history that mentions Baden. The historian David Dumville has written, "I think we can dispose of him quite briefly. He owes his place in our history books to a no smoke without fire school of thought. The fact of the matter is that there is no historical evidence about Arthur. We must reject him from our histories and, above all, for the titles of our books." Some scholars argue that Arthur was originally a fictional hero of folklore, or even a half-forgotten Celtic deity, who became credited with real deeds in the distant past. They cite parallels with figures such as the Kentish Hengist and Horsa, who may be totemic horse gods that later became historicized. Bede ascribed to these legendary figures a historical role in the 5th century Anglo-Saxon conquest of eastern Britain. It is not even certain that Arthur was considered a king in the early texts. Neither the historian nor the annal calls him Rex. The former calls him instead Dux Bellorum and Miles. Historical documents for the post-Roman period are scarce, so a definitive answer to the question of Arthur's historical existence is unlikely. Sites and places have been identified as Arthurian since the 12th century, but archaeology can confidently reveal names only through inscriptions found in secure contexts. The so-called Arthur Stone, discovered in 1998 among the ruins at Tintagel Castle in Cornwall in securely dated 6th century contexts, created a brief stir but proved irrelevant. Other inscriptional evidence for Arthur, including the Glastonbury cross, is tainted with the suggestion of forgery. Although several historical figures have been proposed as the basis for Arthur, no convincing evidence for these identifications has emerged. Name. The origin of the Welsh name Arthur remains a matter of debate. Some suggest it is derived from the Roman nomen gentile Artorius, of obscure and contested etymology. Some scholars have suggested it is relevant to this debate that the legendary King Arthur's name only appears as Arthur, or Arturus, in early Latin Arthurian texts, never as Artorius. However, this may not say anything about the origin of the name Arthur, as Arturi would regularly become Artur when borrowed
borrowed into Welsh. Another possibility is that it is derived from a Brittonic patronym **Cato Regatus via Latinized form Artorius. Less likely is the commonly proposed derivation from Welsh **The plus wr man. There are phonological difficulties with this theory, notably that a Brittonic compound name **Cato Eros should produce Old Welsh **Ardgur and Middle Modern Welsh **Wr and not Arthur. An alternative theory, which has gained only limited acceptance among professional scholars, derived the name Arthur from Arcturus, the brightest star in the constellation Bootes, near Ursa Major of the Great Bear. Classical Latin Arcturus would also have become Artur when borrowed into Welsh, and its brightness and position in the sky led people to regard it as the guardian of the bear and the leader of the other stars in Bootes. A similar first name is Old Irish Artur, which is believed to be derived directly from an earlier Old Welsh Cumbric Artur. The earliest historically attested bearer of the name as a son or grandson of Eden mac Gabrain.